Hey guys, welcome back to Stop the Shunning. My name is Bethany, in case you are new to the channel. I'm very excited about today's guest. I had the honor of speaking with her last month here on the channel, and I will actually link that interview in the bio below so you can take a look at that at the last interview. I am talking about Barbara Anderson. Barbara is a former Jehovah's Witness. She was one of Jehovah's Witnesses for over 40 years. And when she left the organization, since she's left the organization, she has been a vocal, very vocal public advocate for human rights, especially protecting the rights of children. And she has returned to the channel today to tell us more about her time in the Watchtower organization, exposing the abuses that have gone on behind the scenes over the years, and to share some very important updates with us that she has been researching. So, thank you again so much, Barbara, for being on Stop the Shunning.
Thank you, Bethany, and thank you for inviting me here. Uh, Everybody who knows me or has heard of me, they associate me, of course, rightly so, about my feelings towards religions that cover up child abuse. And of course, in this case, it's child sexual abuse, not it, of course, it's physical abuse, but we're very specific here. The situation with the Watchtower and me is we went at loggerheads over this issue. I was in the writing department when I was assigned to work on the Proclaimers book, Jehovah's Witnesses, Proclaimers of God's Kingdom, their history book. And I began to become very good friends with some of the writers in the department. And I am a mother. I had one child, but I was basically the only woman in the writing department that was a parent that I knew of. And there weren't that many women in the writing department. They assist the writers. So it was around 1989, when the editor of the Awake magazine, who I became a friend of, him and his wife. He was a man at that time in his early 60s. So he was in a very important position at the headquarters. So he had asked me a number of times to take a look at some of the draft articles, especially if they had anything to do with women. So that was okay. We had a source file. It was a big, humongous cabinet with probably a few hundred drawers in it. And according to the alphabet, they would put source articles. And these articles basically were contributed by people from the different branches. And they were the secondary articles in the Awake magazine. You always had the featured one on the cover, and then you had all these smaller articles. And so that's the way it worked. So there were other important things that women would do. They would do that kind of filing. There were two women who were older. They would cut out the articles from journals, newspapers, that the men who were senior writers, who they would note when they go through the newspapers every morning, and they would note to cut out this or that. So that's how they kept up to date on the news of the world. And then it would go into another big file drawer alphabetically. So that made smaller articles, and it also kept the writers and other people abreast of of what was going on in the world. So there was a standard to be met in the writing department, and like in most uh, journalistic corporations, there's a very strict ethical standard, and I'm going to one of these days, if you have me back, I'm going to talk about that standard and talk about that. Did the Watchtower meet up with the standard of uh, the actual journalistic standard for writers? So that's a topic that I think that when I share it, you'll all get a deeper understanding of how the inner workings of the most important department in the organization. You got to have the writers before you can put anything out there, right? So the child abuse situation, being a mother, was introduced to me, as I said, and the man his name was Harry Poloyan. Harry Poloyan, I mentioned the last time I was here, he was a Harvard graduate. He also was a very, very conscientious man and very kind. And he rightly so should have been the Awake editor. So, but me, I'm busy with doing research for the particular men that were assigned to work on the Proclaimer's book. So I'm researching until Harry one day asked me to review an article that was addressing a woman's problem. And I said, why? He said, well, I'm ill at ease with the way that this writer uh, discuss certain problems that women. I think I mentioned that once before, but it was just true. But once he saw that I had the ability to do that kind of work, then he would bring me other things, which was okay. I wasn't assigned to work with him full time, but I could also squeeze this type of thing in, or I could work on my own time or in the evening. Many writers never went to meetings on the weekdays because they worked long hours. I would stay after we had our supper at the main dining room, and I would go back to work because there was just so much to do. At times like this, that's where I became more and more uh, involved in this situation with child abuse. And as I said, I was a mom. So that really was the basic reason why these men were discussing these things with me. Even though there were some female secretaries to the governing body, they had male secretaries too, by the way. And the male secretaries did the secret stuff. The female secretaries didn't. I would have second thoughts about the child abuse thing, and I couldn't get it out of my mind. So eventually, when I finished with my research on the Proclaimer's book, I was full time on the child abuse. So that's working with Harry Poloyan, the overseer of the department, a governing body member. He understood the child abuse problem after a while. He really understood. When he met some of the victims himself, a meeting was set up for him on his own trip to meet victims. And when he came back, he was completely on our side to do something about this.
Can you give the audience a time frame, like around what time was this happening?
It was 89 that I went into the department. So I would say I left Bethel at the end of 92. So I was involved in this about a year and a half. I also was writing, Harry would give me assignments to write some articles, and he also gave me a public talk to write. My husband gave the talk actually at a convention. I sat in the audience saying, "Yeah, I wrote that."
You wrote,
We were never, women were never even allowed. If you put out a woman submitted an article for the magazine and he got in there, we wouldn't be allowed to put the scripture in the back at the end of an article because we were a woman and we'd be teaching. But I taught the whole audience.
you, you
I
wrote,
thought that was really neat. But I couldn't tell anybody, just Joe knew. And Harry, he was assigned to write it by Jairus, vice the governing body, Jairus. He said, "Would you do this? Here's what Jairus wants." And it was on Jesus, the light of the world. So it was really a lot of scriptures in that.
yeah, I mean, for a woman to, you wrote the outline to that talk that your husband gave.
I did the whole thing
That's unheard of.
because they're not manuscripts. They were
Right.
manuscripts.
But that's unheard of,
Well,
Barbara.
yeah, well, I'm telling the truth. That's
I
just
got,
what I
I
wasn't
got,
a regular one. We snuck it in. So,
that's awesome. I never,
what you knew is who you knew. I
right,
didn't
right.
ask for this, it just happened. I was in engineering, and see, that's I think how this kind of happened. I was in the engineering department, and I talked about that the last time I was here. So I knew all about the organization growth and the buildings we were building. I was on all of that. The writers, this one of the senior writers, came to see me, and he said, "We want to write an article on the increase in our buildings here on the uh, uh, they were, buying up the area of the older buildings. They were remodeling them. They would build some new buildings." He said, I don't know anything about this. He said, "I wonder," since I think you do. He said, "I asked around and you've been very involved with research on all of this because that was an area that was, everything historical had to be researched." So the article that I came up with came out April 22nd, 1989. And there it is.
Anyone who knows or is familiar at all with the Jehovah's Witnesses, it's, you said you liked Harry Poloyan, and but like there was, it's such a misogynistic organization, generally speaking. So women didn't just have roles like
Oh
these.
no.
We're not asked just casually to help out or to collaborate, and seen as equals or in any way like that. So it was that's a very big deal, just in case
Yeah.
anybody needs a little backstory or needs a little context. That's big that you were.
Well, there's more with women that went on than people on the outside ever knew. They had very important positions in the finance department, also in the service department. They wouldn't be dealing with people's problems, but they did have very specific jobs. Without them, these departments couldn't have existed. That was just the way it was.
So can you tell us more about the collaboration? So you worked on the Proclaimers, did research for the Proclaimers book, which was really big, and then this article, and then did you do any other?
I want to show you. Yeah, here's an article I wrote. 91 was the 200th anniversary of the Bill of Rights. It was celebrated. So I went into Harry and I said, "Did you know that this is the 200th year of the Bill of Rights?" He said, "No, I didn't know that." And I said, "Well, I just heard on the radio or television, whatever." And he said, "Write an article on it." And I said, "Huh? What do I know about the Bill of Rights, right?"
Right.
So,
Did,
so you know, it was fun because I like to do the research and figure the stuff out. So there it is.
oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Bill of Rights.
So this person that came to see me said, "I don't know if you know this, but there's two young women in school." She said, "I have an idea that you could interview them." So I asked about that, and it was cleared. So I interviewed these two women, and the mother of one of them came. So it turned out to be this.
Students participate in National History Day. Wow. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
All right. And there was two 14-year-old girls from Pennsylvania, and Nicole DeSalvo and Gwen Naglack. They are not Jehovah's Witnesses. I'm reading here. And they chose two. They could write on anything to do with uh, the subject, National History Day. They chose two flag salute cases that involved the witnesses in the 1940s. In their research, they spoke with those involved in the Minersville School District versus Govitas and West Virginia Board of Education versus Barnett cases. These are two of the most important cases in the history establishment of the Bill of Rights. Of course, way back then they didn't have anything like this, but this was so important. And they wrote the articles, and they gave an oral presentation, oral performance entitled The Courage to Sit Down. So what do you think that was about?
Yeah, because Jehovah's Witnesses don't salute the flag.
Yeah, they have performed a signal service to democracy by their fight to preserve their civil rights. For in their struggle, they have done much to secure those rights for every minority group in America. You might not want to hear that. People who are opposed nowadays to Jehovah's Witnesses, they don't want to give that credit.
But at the
But
time, that was huge.
it was huge. And to this day, these freedoms were established. First Amendment freedoms were established at the highest court of the land because of they won 47 cases at the Supreme Court level. For the witnesses struggle, they've done much to secure those rights for every minority group in America. Guess who they didn't establish the rights of the First Amendment for? Jehovah's Witnesses. Jehovah's Witnesses do not have freedom to speak. If you speak your mind,
The irony.
shunning,
Oh, the irony.
disfellowship, and shunning.
I'm so glad you brought that point up, Barbara, because it reminds me of and I could be misquoting this. I think it's the July Awake of 2009. Maybe you know, or somebody listening. I think it's July Awake of 2009, where it says no one should be forced. And I know there's going to be people listening who know this script, this not scripture, this sentence from their own literature. They're referring to people, they're referring to potential converts who are studying with Jehovah's Witnesses.
I remember that, yes.
They're giving this generous clause to potential converts that, well, if you have any misgivings and you're getting maybe some backlash or some friction from your family, it says no one should be forced to worship in a way that he finds unacceptable or be made to choose between his beliefs and his family.
Right. I wrote that out about 2 weeks ago. Quotes like that. I
And,
wrote, and I sent them around to quite a number of people.
so the point being is that for potential converts, they can back away and say, okay, well, maybe this is not right for me and I shouldn't have to choose between my beliefs and my family. And thanks for not pressuring me. Okay, but Jehovah's Witnesses, to your point, are not given extended that same grace or that same opportunity, that if they decide they don't want to be Jehovah's Witnesses anymore, or if they even breathe in the wrong direction against the governing body or say something wrong, or the sun shines in the wrong direction, they lose their family and they're shunned.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
it is. And that's the main reason why
Hypocritical.
governments in Eastern Europe are taking Jehovah's Witnesses to task over human rights, and especially human rights for children.
When I was reviewing the new elders handbook, the Shepherd the Flock of God book, I literally laughed out loud. And not ha, well, I mean, I laughed, but not for the reason you think. I laughed when there was a paragraph that said that child abuse includes emotional abuse. I'm
Oh,
thinking,
yes,
I'm thinking
yes.
by that logic, you could consider destroying their future, emotional abuse, pressuring them about Armageddon and getting baptized
That's right.
before they have the ability to, their thinking faculties, their brain is not fully developed. You've been shoving propaganda and all this fear mongering into your children from infancy. That could, by that logic, you could argue that Jehovah's Witnesses organization is guilty of emotional abuse of children. So that was just one thing that just kind of made it's one of those moments that it kind of like your brain feels like it's going to explode, just like you're going to pop a blood vessel. When I saw that in print, I was just like, you got to be kidding me.
And so these policies, remember that policies and beliefs are dogma are entirely different. I said that last time and I'll say it again and again. Religions do not change their doctrine, they change their policies. And the other word attached to that is the word practice, policies and practice.
How do you feel, or what connections or correlations do you make, Barbara, when um, everybody who's watching this knows about new light, so they change, they say, oh well, we've had an adjustment in our understanding. Now Jehovah has given us better understanding of something. There's new light about this situation. So it does feel like they're changing their doctrine in order to change their policy and justify their policy.
Yeah,
How
well,
do
you
you
got a good
yeah,
point there. But basically, when you talk about doctrine, there's only four doctrines of Jehovah's Witnesses, and the one of course they consider very important is a ransom. No, well, no Trinity, no hellfire, no immortality. So, but they don't make changes in that. They rarely even write an article on that. When was the last time you ever saw an article on?
right?
They put out a booklet 100 million years ago on the Trinity. So Harry Poyne actually wrote that one. He got,
Really?
yeah, he got to be an expert on the Trinity. Then I found out later he had somebody on the outside was sending him contra um, contributions on the subject, not money, but information. So he had a lot of help. All he had to do was he knew so many people for 40 years at the Watchtower. So knew so many people. So if he gets a big assignment, the assignment comes from the teaching committee. We're not talking about the average magazine, the big one. And the teaching committee is not one person. Jairus was the head of it, but there's all kinds of committees that come underneath the teaching committee. Well, they have these other committees. When they went to through to this kind of rule in Bethel, I had already left Bethel, and so one of the senior writers called me about this, making committees, and he said, "Yeah," he said, "we had problems before when one person would run a department." He said, "Now we got committees," and he says, "There's more confusion than ever before." Because making up a committee is people, and everybody's got a different background, subjectively making decisions. So they fuss and feud over these things, but they're brothers. And listen, I'm human. I recognize them as just human, but they put the dang stuff in here that makes them sound like they're not human. That
Right.
there's You become a witness and you're all of a sudden one of the most brilliant people on the face of the earth. You don't argue, you're wonderful. So they convince people, and it's the writer's responsibility, I believe. They say the things that can't possibly be reality as far as a human. You can't have a brotherhood the way they described it in that we have, but we don't have it. That's why we got this fellowshipping. So,
Right.
the
Exactly.
Watchtower has hired uh, uh, a number of people, not a lot. I think it's two or three main people that are hired by the Watchtower who are not witnesses, and those same folk are hired by other corporations to extol the virtues and the wonderment of an organization's abilities. And these men, and I know of the one woman their stuff goes into major press in Europe, and it it isn't true what they're saying. I mean, they just talk about things about the organization that they glorify the organization, even on things like the Norway thing. But the reality is not with these people, that's for sure. But they do make a lot of money doing this. I do know that. Now we're getting more information. It's coming out. I do know, like everybody, what I know about the Norway thing is typical because the people that, and I got one of the head, what would I call her? She's the head activist against Jehovah's Witnesses in one European country, wrote me through Messenger the other day. So they're reaching out to us here in this country on these issues. I've been working with others in other countries. Stephen Unthank, I've been working with him for years. He never stops investigating the Watchtower and has discovered, well, he worked behind the scenes with the Royal Commission in 2015 and had been working since 2011 on all preparing for that. I was even putting stuff out for them. I was sending them material. So, we only speak truth. But now the governments are recognized as those truths to be applicable to everybody. Not this one can do this and this religion can do that. When it harms, that's the issue. You can believe what you want, but you can't harm the welfare of people is what the Supreme Court says is the most important thing. Now, I don't know that I mentioned this last week, but I have this marvelous thing hanging on my wall about increased light, Increased light is the mindless justification for removing errors. Isn't that that's
Yep.
such a good description of
Yep.
increased light.
Yep.
So,
Well, you mentioned that you had written a full article in for the Awake, correct? Am I remembering that
yeah,
correct?
I've written a few full articles. This is one of them here, Understanding Difficult Children.
Oh,
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah, I'm an expert at difficult children. I was difficult. My son was difficult.
What year was that?
ADHD is basically what my son was diagnosed with. But as he got older, he calmed down. He really didn't end up with, he shuns me because I went public. That was basically, but he's a nice person. And he has a right to choose who he wants for a mother. What?
Uh,
You
my
can't,
my
you
I
can't,
think we all have our opinions on that, but if
you,
that's your
you,
stance, more
you
power to
can't. And we were only in Bethel a year or two. Let's see. And this is 86. So we were there 4 years. And I didn't write that, but that's my husband and I.
That's you and Joe.
Yeah.
1986. Wow.
We went in 82. And so this is the doctor, he was a mechanic at the car Watchtower's car garage. And so he's posing as a doctor. That
That's
was funny.
that one. And then the difficult children article, you wrote that.
Yeah.
You wrote that. And so what year was that?
I also wrote the two on the Bill of Rights.
Right, right.
Yeah. And I wrote one on circumcision of women. That was something else. I learned through there that this is a side point, but I learned through that article that many of the birth control pills cause abortion. Did I think that they don't sell that anymore, but for years, women, I think I mentioned that before, they were aborting every month. And I talked to Harry
Uh,
about it. Harry and Rose, his wife Rose, I mean, she was a very good friend of mine. So we had a nice relationship. So, um, so I talked to him about this. And after all, he was the one who signed me to write that article. And I said, "Don't you know that one pill?" I learned it when I did the research. And I said, "Don't you think we ought to talk more about abortion in our literature? If God is against abortion, the sisters should know." He got to thinking about it and he said, "The sisters have too much to worry about in this organization. Let's not put one more thing on them."
Oh, that was a very nice dismissive way
Yes.
of put.
Well, he's a man. He's a man. You know,
So,
uh,
Barbara, can you you mentioned when we were speaking earlier, you mentioned that you had something really important, some important updates that you wanted to share. Could you go into that regarding your advocacy for children's rights?
well, I certainly do. And what I want to do is I want to show everybody in the awake this on this.
Oh, wow. Did you write that one too?
I did the research for it,
Women.
all the research,
Okay,
and I
yeah,
brought the
wait.
story.
Can you hold that up again for the
Yeah,
audience?
and I brought the story
Women,
to the department about what women's problems in this organization. I mean,
please,
and they
Barbara.
signed a senior writer.
Barbara, can you tell can you're holding up the photo? Can you tell everybody what the title is?
Okay, women deserving of respect.
Huh. That's fascinating. Your involvement as a woman should
Yeah,
that's I don't think a lot
I
of
actually
people,
pinched myself years later. I'd say,
yeah.
knowing but you got used to it. I got used to it. Um, well, after all, I did work in the world with men, and I knew the relationships. I mean, we didn't have issues. It was a brain thing. Make money for the man that you work for.
Right.
It was always um, information. I call myself an information passer alonger as my nickname for myself. That's all I do. I'm not trying to convert people. I give them facts. They can do with what they want with it.
There
But
you
facts make freedom.
there you go.
Mhm. I used to belong to, when I started to do this work, I shouldn't call it work. When, as an activist, I was on my own a long time ago, and I joined SNAP, Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests. It
Okay.
was in its infancy then. In fact, I met the two people who created SNAP before they had created it. I met them in northern state, was invited, and for a particular reason. And it was actually an attorney that invited me, and my husband. And then he introduced us to these men, two that wanted to create an organization. It's primarily Catholic. It was all engineered towards the Catholic child abuse problem. So we had a number of hours talk, and they presented their ideas, and we were telling about our past at headquarters and so forth. Also, Bill Bowen was there, and it was he and I that put together Silent Lambs. Now, I'm not affiliated with Silent Lambs, and I haven't been for years and years and years. Bill was on his own, and I really don't know where he is or what he's doing. He has a life of his own, of course. So, and Pope Leo, that's this uh, first paragraph. Pope Leo's abuse instructions hollow without accountability for his own failures. Pope Leo's latest remarks to bishops, instructing them not to hide sexual abuse allegations, are hollow and disingenuous. Behind closed doors, he tells bishops what survivors have demanded for decades, yet in practice, he has refused to abide by these standards himself. So then he has ignored every single reform that SNAP has presented to him in a letter on the day of his election. So Pope Leo is the new American Pope. Pope Leo's instructions cannot be taken seriously given his own track record over the last few years, said Peter Isley, head of SNAP's global advocacy. He speaks of accountability while presiding over the cover-up of child abuse crimes. The only thing he can do to restore trust is to implement a binding and universal zero-tolerance law, immediately remove abuses from ministry, priests, and open up the Vatican abuse archives, including his own records, to civil authorities. Until Pope Leo confronts his own failures and implements enforceable reforms, survivors and the public should treat his statements as little more than damage control. That's the new Pope. It's all talk. Okay. So then I get information from someone who sent me an article that came out in Canada, and it was about the Toronto Film Festival in The Guardian, the newspaper The Guardian. The working title is Nuns versus the Vatican. So Nuns vs. Vatican. And it's about a new film. This film follows women who claim to have been abused by a former Jesuit priest. So it's about one priest and the years and years of doing nothing. They didn't try him. They didn't turn him over to the police for years. He was so popular in the Catholic Church, and he had been raping and worse, if they could be a worse, torture and whatever, nuns. So it says here, this is the article, a complicated stain on Pope Francis' legacy is further explored in Nuns versus the Vatican, a sensitive and unsettling documentary following women whose sexual abuse allegations were long ignored by the Catholic Church and the broader system that protects and enables predators within. Please, audience, listen. This is not me making a report on the Catholic Church. Okay, premiered at the Toronto Film Festival on Saturday, largely centers around Gloria Brancini and Mirjam Kovac, who are among dozens allegedly victimized by Marko Rupnik, a former Jesuit priest currently awaiting canonical trial for sexual, spiritual, and physical abuse. Rupnik was excommunicated in 2020 for absolving the sins of a novice with whom he had sex, but that excommunication was lifted within the same month after Rupnik repented. One expert voice in the documentary points out that the excommunication could only have been lifted with authorization from Pope Francis. Recounts how the Jesuit priest allegedly groomed and then sexually and psychologically abused her in ways that grew increasingly aggressive and violent in the early 90s. Okay, according to Branciani, when she reported the abuse, now we get to the meat of this, she was punished by Loyola's Mother Superior, Sister Ivanka Hosta, and forced out of religious life by Father Thomas Spidlik in Rome. So this is how they treated cheated abuse, sexual abuse, who would even write the resignation letter on her behalf. These actions left her ostracized by the community she considered family and dealing with suicidal ideation. Brancini joined several others in Nuns who have experienced similar abuses across the Catholic Church. And then it mentions Barbara Doris, who was director of SNAP when I would belong to it. But she didn't resign. I think she just got too old. I don't know. She was director back then, and who she was molested. She described being sexually abused, impregnated, and forced to endure a life-threatening abortion with bleach by a doctor who shamed her viciously. I'm reading this because when we get to the end, keep in mind the Catholic Church. How big is it? Humongous. Okay? She is among the voices in the documentary, painting a picture of how widespread these crimes can be. A 1994-95 study fielding anonymous responses reported that 1 in 3 nuns experienced sexual abuse by priests, and how the system ensures victims stay silent. Nuns, after all, take vows of poverty, chastity, and silence. A system that isolates and makes them easy prey, especially for the very priests they confess to, holding power not only over them, but their families and communities. Rupnik himself is said to have reinforced that power dynamic by comparing God's relationship to man's relationship with women. Adding to the problem, Doris points out, is how priests would blame abuse on homosexuality, stigmatizing sexual orientation, and erasing the victimization of women in the process. The patriarchy in the church is in full view in the documentary when protesters approach a priest about the unveiling of more art from Rubnik, despite the allegations against him. His art, which Catholics kneel and pray before, was created while he was allegedly perpetrating abuse. The Vatican has since ordered all of Rubnik's art to be removed from its website as part of its slow response to allegations since Pope Francis first publicly admitted the abuse of nuns in 2019 press conference held on his plane before a summit on the matter of the Vatican. So we're getting to the end of this, guys. In 2021, Pope Francis amended the Vatican's Code of Canon Law to allow for prosecution of priests charged with abusing adults. 23, in response to public backlash, he waived the statute of limitations in the Rubnik case, allowing Brancini and Kovacs reports to be submitted. All these years, nothing was done with these priests who did this. Now here is the shocker. This paragraph threw me for a loop. And I'm not exaggerating because I've heard it all. Yet Rupnik's case, following years of the priests being moved between dioceses, will still be tried under the Vatican's canon law, which has long operated to protect the church as opposed to a criminal court, right? No reporting of this to a criminal court. It comes under Vatican's canon law as so it protects the church from what? Reproach? Negative,
Yeah, there you go.
negative information?
Negative publicity.
Yes. The difference, as one expert in the documentary points out, is that his abuses would not be treated as a crime, but a sin. When I read that, I want you to know I was dumbfounded. Dumbfounded. Who also, when there is sexual abuse and worse.
Now anybody can look at the Shepherd the Flock of God book, and they specifically in print put, we want to be clear that child sexual abuse is seen as a crime.
Right.
And we're not, but for decades, Barbara, for decades, that was not the
It's a
case.
sin.
It
It
was
was a sin.
It was a
And
sin.
I'm going to tell you, I checked on this. I checked on it yesterday. The Watchtower says this. They say it, how that they treat this
Right.
as a crime. And not, well, they treat it as a sin too,
Right.
also.
But they've landed in themselves
Yeah.
in such hot water.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the big difference here is the requirement in the Elder's Manual is to call the legal department first.
Right.
And that keeps it in-house.
Keeps it in-house.
They keep it secret. They are known to do this. I talked to a number of ex-elders who told me absolutely it ties it all up in the legal department.
They
There's
technically
no room.
they technically tell victims and their families in writing that they will not be punished for contacting law enforcement, but they're still attempting to keep it in-house.
That's right.
It's not their first line of defense to go directly to the police.
Exactly. And when you call the legal department, that's where you call. They also give advice. And the advice doesn't necessarily, they want to know all the dirty details.
Right.
Yeah. So the elders have to report it. The family can report it to the authorities.
It's all very carefully, it's like
Yes.
a Rubik's Cube. It's all very
right.
carefully arranged
That's
to
right.
protect
And
themselves.
why would this Watchtower Society have a policy all these years to treat child abuse as sin and not do it. They never reported it to the authorities. And those who reported it were even, I have old letters to the service department that absolutely discourage in the letter to not report it to the authorities. They don't say those words, but they sure come down hard on the people who go to report
Of
to the
course, of
authorities.
course. Like I
We're
said,
going back, to the 40s or 50s. Now, what shocked me the most about this, treating it as a sin, who did they copy? They copied the Catholic Church, the
right?
one that they damned.
They railed against the
Yeah,
Catholic Church and
damned
condemned the Catholic
the
Church for
church.
decades, and
That's
they're,
right.
they're using their playbook.
So it's not canon law that Jehovah's Witnesses have, but it is to Jehovah's Witnesses, the authority figures is equal, if it was a Catholic, to canon law. The laws in the manual, in that manual for years, left out the important parts about the child abuse and what should be done about it. So they now why this was pointed out to me by a former elder, and I said, why would they copy the Catholic Church in this? Somebody along the years, when they, because in 1947 there was an article in the Wake about excommunication being a Catholic thing, and it's pagan and all of that.
Right?
And 52 they were disfellowshipping over a sin. Okay, so they looked at all things as sins, and my husband, he reminded 200 elders at a meeting about child abuse being a sin
Right.
and child abuse being a crime. That's the way he said it to them.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so they knew it was a crime. That's a long time ago that he said that. I was being, he was being asked about me, why I left the organization. He said, because of this. And so,
The parallels between this movie
yeah,
and this documentary and how the witnesses have used the same playbook.
that's exactly right.
It's
Well, the
striking.
elder I talked to, I just wanted people to know that Rubnik was a pretty horrible person and they worshiped him. And Jehovah's Witnesses would be the first people to say, see how bad the Catholic Church
Right.
is? They
But
worship
they
this
don't but they
man.
don't look in the mirror. They
Yeah.
don't look in the mirror and see themselves.
Sin meant that they pervert. Sin leads to repentance. That's the most important thing of this whole thing. If you are viewed as a sinner, then God expects you to repent, and then you're forgiven. And that's the whole problem with the Catholics.
The Jehovah.
And it's not only to protect the church; it is the fact that the uh, pervert gets a chance to continue on.
Yes, and that is exactly how the Jehovah's Witnesses do it, and that is now showing up in the Shepherd the Flock of God book, that there is a clause that as long as the predator is repentant, like you said, they have the opportunity to stay within the congregation and then just be shuffled around and hop around and find possibly new victims. So it's absolutely horrific.
When is the last time you heard, maybe just recently or the past few years, where a priest is arrested? But
Okay.
generally
Yeah.
speaking, they are not arrested, and and Jehovah's Witnesses leadership knew that, and they are not punished either. These molesters are not; these priests are not punished. Do you know how many I got this article in the Awake, April 8th, 1993, the year after I left Bethel. Victims of pedophile priests speak out. One an article, and Harry Point told me, he said, we are not going to talk about the Catholic Church in Watching the World and the Awake anymore and making a big deal out of they got arrested, they got arrested.
Ah,
Because we got our own problems.
because
That's what
we
he
got
said.
our That, oh, okay. So
So
Harry,
that
yeah,
was the reason for putting that out to show them how bad they were. And this was from a U.S. News and World Report. During the past decade, some 400 Roman Catholic priests have been reported to church or civil authorities for sexual abuse of children. It mentions U.S. News World Report and National Catholic Reporter, that's an NCR, notes that the speakers sounded another theme repeatedly through the conference. The first abuse is sexual, the second and more painful is psychological. The second abuse occurs when the church refuses to listen to victims of abuse. Think of our victims of Jehovah's Witnesses who weren't listened to by the elders and the organization. This is the way it was and is still in the Catholic Church. Fairly or unfairly, NCR reports they portrayed Catholic clergy as belonging to an unhealthy and misguided group more bent on preserving privilege and power than in serving lay needs. That's what he talked about the Catholic magazine. Several speakers made ominous comparisons to the Reformation, which split the church wide open in the 16th century. And then it goes on to the how much money that the Catholic Church has put on $400 million, a billion by the year 2000 to settle these cases, but they don't change the rule. Why don't they take them to the authorities instead of looking at this as a sin? And let me tell you, this article here in this newspaper says that this protection was to protect the church. That's what Watchtower has been doing all these years. Protect. Oh, we don't go to the authorities. We don't bring reproach upon Jehovah's organization. Number one, and that's what I saw when I read that last paragraph. This, I could scream for the victims.
Barbara, I, and so many people who are going to be watching this share your passion,
Oh,
share your
my
passion,
anger.
and are very upset. Um, that's an understatement of how Watchtower cares more about its image, its reputation, and its assets,
That's right.
and keeping people in power than protecting children. Do you,
Even now,
yeah,
even now,
even now,
they say it's a crime. It's a crime. Call the but first thing you do, you call the legal department.
and that you would think any rational person who cares about children is just going to hear it and go straight to the police.
That's right.
They're protecting their cronies, they're protecting those at the top. The parallels, thank you for sharing. Those parallels are very obvious.
This
Um,
is a
Another understatement. Um, do you have any closing remarks that you would like to leave with the audience today?
Oh, I do have to say that one thing in the elders book they did say, if the family wants to report, don't interfere. That's a new statement.
Right. That's what I'm saying. They put the onus on the family as opposed to just doing the right thing and going directly to the authorities.
But when the Watchtower follows the Catholic Church, they're doing it for safety. That's the whole thing. They followed them, made it a sin, and that's what the church has been doing, Catholic Church has been doing for years and years and years, observing this horror.
So there is a, I don't know if you've heard of this film in 2015. It actually won, I don't know if it won Best, I think it won Best Picture. It was called Spotlight.
I saw it. I
Yeah,
cried in the movie because it was just like my story when I went public. I went to
I
public and I
know.
walked in the park with, just remember he walked in the park
I
with
know.
the,
He walked in the park and he saw the church and he saw it next to the
I,
playground.
I sat there and I cried
Yes, and I,
because I did the same thing. I was walking with somebody in authority and I was trying to tell them what this was. It,
yeah.
it was,
I am Barbara at the time. I was an indoctrinated witness in 2015. My husband and I left in 2017. We disassociated. But in 2015, I saw that. And I have to tell you, Barbara, I didn't even know at the time. I was not aware that the I knew from watching you, in case anybody goes back to watch my original interview with you that I did, the first interview that we did last month. in that interview, obviously, I talk about the fact that you were on Dateline and you were bringing awareness to these abuses, and a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses did not know about the abuse. That was my first exposure when I think I was 14. I think, I think I was 13 or 14 at the time when that Dateline special came out. And obviously, I told you the story in our first interview that I was sitting there with my devout parents, and we're a devout Jehovah's Witness family, and I'm just going, "Oh my gosh, this is insane." And I believe her. I believe Barbara. I believe that there's something sinister going on behind the scenes, but technically we were a devout Jehovah's Witness family. So I had no choice but to kind of sit there and be like, "Well, I can't say I agree with her or whatever," but because we were watching on the TV. So fast forward, married and gone and away from my parents, but still indoctrinated, as a Jehovah's Witness in 2015 when Spotlight came out. I thought to myself, I thought of you and I thought of the Dateline special, and I thought, I have a feeling the witnesses, it made me, I tied back. My brain went back to that time when I was a young teenager going, I think the Jehovah's Witnesses have a serious problem, but I didn't entertain it too much because then, if you have any doubts in the Jehovah's Witnesses, you pull at one thread and
Yes,
everything
yes,
travels.
that's right.
I remember telling my, yeah, I remember telling my parents, I said, have you seen Spotlight? It was excellent. And I said, it makes me wonder about the witnesses and how they handle any cases of child sexual abuse. And I honestly don't remember what their response was, but it was something to the effect of we trust Jehovah's appointed men to take care of it. AKA contact the legal department and hush
Yeah,
hush, push it under the rug kind of
right.
thing. But I
And
remember
you'd say, you
Spotlight
say,
was big.
you always said, well, they know best. They know what they're doing. We don't really know.
Right,
They're
right,
handling it correctly.
right. Well, Barbara, thank you so much. Is it
Thank you.
okay?
Thank you for doing this and having people like me with information, the facts.
Because like you said, Barbara, you mentioned this earlier that you're an information passer longer. I don't care, and I'm going to reiterate this again. I may disagree with Jehovah's Witness ideology. I may have my feelings and opinions about it and think certain things are wrong or don't believe in certain things, but I just want a Jehovah's Witness to have the information to be able to make an informed decision
Right.
about whether or not to stay
Yes.
a Jehovah's Witness.
Yes.
When I got baptized, as a minor, which could be construed as emotional abuse by the new standards in the Shepherd the Flock of God book, pressuring minors to get baptized. I was 14 when I got baptized.
Me too.
When I made this decision, this personal decision to dedicate my life to Jehovah and to the organization, they consider it informed consent. But at 14 years old, I was not aware
There is no such
of
thing
the
for
systemic
14.
child sexual abuse. I was not aware of all these things. And it's like you sign a bad deal. It's like doing due diligence before you buy a house or commit to anything major. You have
Right.
to know this information. So if you're a Jehovah's Witness watching this, I'm not trying to quote, and you know, we've said this before, not trying to tear down your faith, evil
No,
apostate.
this has nothing to do with your personal belief in a deity or whatever.
No, but you should
Nothing.
know. But you should be given the facts. You should
That's
know
right.
this
Thank you.
information so
Mhm.
you can make an informed decision.
You know, the irony of all of this for me is that I was raised a Catholic. I
I
left the Catholic Church. It did not have truth. And here I am acknowledging that Jehovah's Witnesses is a religion that I chose and that I loved. I was following the Catholic Church's, would you call it an example? They were following it. You could have picked any religion in the world. You wouldn't have found anything as bad as some of the history of the church. But I don't care if people are, I got Catholic relatives, but my feelings on the matter of why why did the witnesses do this? It's just I don't mean to sound so emotional because really I've been used to dealing with this for over 20 years. This would be 27 years. I'm not stopping. They did this to protect the church, just like the Catholic did, protect the church. And and there's got to be some way to for retribution. I
Well,
don't know what.
you having such a wealth of knowledge of what goes on behind the scenes, your personal experience, you coming on the channel today to share even more of your experience and your story, that's how it gets out there, and
Yes,
you raise awareness.
it's going to be more.
Yeah.
It's going to be more from me. Everybody's going to be so tired of listening to me or don't tune in. But I have already made some connections. I'm going to talk about the following of the Catholic Church. The Jehovah's Witnesses never picked on any church like they did on the Catholic Church. And here they go. The worst possible thing you could do is follow their example on child abuse.
It's pure hypocrisy. Well, Barbara, thank you so much again for coming back on the channel. And again, like I said, sharing your wealth of knowledge and experience, your candor is much appreciated. Your advocacy is much appreciated by former Jehovah's Witnesses and people who are probably tuning in for the first time. CSA victims themselves who are watching this and possibly still in recovery from years of what they endured. Appreciate everything that you're doing. You've really helped to wake up a lot of people over the past 20 years or more from the Jehovah's Witnesses organization. And again, I know it's these issues that you have, that you're working hard to expose and not.
I'm not finished, as I said before. I am not finished. I will be talking to major organizations.
Well, we look forward to hearing more from you in the future. Thank you so much. And if you enjoyed this interview, please like and subscribe and share it with your friends and family, anybody who you think can benefit from it. Thank you for tuning in. And again,
Thank you
thank you, Barbara.
for what you're doing. Bye.
Bye.